let me know a little about what you did in the Navy and what you worked on and stuff like that, and that'll kind of get us started.
Okay, great.
Okay.
During the Gulf War, I was in the Navy. I enlisted as a sonar technician ground, which means that I was on the surface of the water hunting for submarines from a ship. It could be a number of different ships. I was more trained on the equipment versus the vessel that I was on. I went to boot camp in San Diego there, and then I went to A school for when you learn about sonar acoustics. I did that schooling for 4 months. And then before I was released, I was activated. I had enlisted as a reservist for college, and I was activated. So I spent almost a year on active duty, stationed in California, though. I never actually was deployed anywhere. And during that time, we learned about how to use the sonar dome and all the equipment associated with sonar, which is pretty diverse. It's not just the front of the ship or the microphones towards the rear, but there's also a lot of different equipment. Some's deployed from the air, some's deployed from the ship. There's sonar buoys. There's a lot of different methods of tracking and determining sound underwater.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it sounds well, other than the sound and anything like that. I mean, I know it works on a very similar principle to radar, and that of course is what I did in the Air Force. So, but obviously we could not pick up sounds with the radar, so a little bit different. So in your occupation with the Navy, was that something that required you to have a security clearance?
Yes, I had a secret clearance in the Navy, and that's why I can't tell you about the equipment that I worked on, or even my office. I couldn't even really go into details about on because of that clearance.
Okay, yeah, and I understand that, and I definitely don't want to ask you to break that security clearance for sure. In the job, would it make you consider that what you did do there might be related to flat Earth in some way?
Um, During my time in the Navy, it never once occurred to me that there could be any other possibility that we would have to have lived on a ball Earth. So it wasn't in the purview of anyone around me. It was just never even something ever talked about. Um, there's nothing in the literature that I read that told me one way or the other. But in hindsight, this is all in hindsight. It's
Mhm.
only when I look back that I can tell you that everything that we've done to measure sound, everything that we do right now in the open market, things that I can talk about, the actual passive acoustic equipment that's available or the active sonar equipment that's available, all of them do rely on the concept of a flat Earth, even though they don't explicitly say that.
Mhm.
There's even some specific equipment that I simply just can't talk about, but it really does, only in hindsight, do I realize this would only work if we're living in a flat environment. In fact, all of our charts were based off that.
Right. Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me at all because so were the radar charts that we worked off of. So in sonar, obviously, if you're in a submarine or something like that, what kind of ranging did you have? I mean, how far away could you actually detect targets with the sonar?
Well, technically, you could hear a target for as far away as, say, 1,000 miles.
Wow.
It's gonna depend on there's a SOFAR, there is a channel. You might be familiar with this because the same thing exists in the troposphere, I think. I mean, in the atmosphere, there is a channel where the pressure causes sound to move slower than anywhere else. And underwater, that's met through pressure, temperature, salinity. There's an optimal curve there, which actually causes a slowdown of sound as sound passes through that SOFAR channel. So that channel acts as a sort of an underwater internet for whales, for really anything. Anyone who wants to communicate underwater could pump their sound into that SOFAR channel, and it's going to travel for thousands of miles. To me, that alone is a flat Earth proof. There is a consequence of sound being wrapped around a donut, versus sound being able to just permeate straight. However, it's not exact enough where I've gotten in enough arguments with people where I can't just like flip this card over and go, haha, see here,
Right.
here's the perfect proof for that. So that's just one element of underwater acoustics. There's really two types of sonar. There's an active sonar and a passive sonar. And so in active mode, you would be sending a pulse or a signal or an oscillation out from your transducer, and then listening for the time it took for that pulse to get back. That would give you a very active, not only vector of where your target is, but more specifically, it would give you a distance and a range. And that's really is what's crucial for underwater. Meanwhile, on passive side, all you can really do is detect a vector of where something's coming from. You can't really range it from there. But the primary meat, the stake that I'm bringing to this conversation, is that there is something called acoustic shadows. And these acoustic shadows, I'm sure there's the same thing in the radar. There are radar shadows where if you're hitting a direct target, anything behind that target is going to be blind. And it's just simply, it would be the easiest thing in the world for submarines to hide over the curve. I don't see how they would ever be able to be found simply because they could stay low enough on the bottom where there's always a hump of earth between them and the person trying to hunt them.
So essentially anything over, say, 10 to 15 miles, which would give you, 60 to 100 foot plus of curvature, theoretically, they would be in that blind spot for the sonar.
Exactly. And what I'm quoting here, this is all standard. You can Google this and look it up. This is just, how any kind of underwater submarine you would buy off the market, their sonar equipment, or if you were to build your own. This is just how transducers work. Yeah, there's going to be shadows, and you're going to be blind behind those shadows, and a hill or a hump at the bottom would be that giant shadow.
Okay, wow. That's very interesting. I never thought about anything like that before. Yeah, so 60, it looks like 60 miles is it, man. So if you got things going maybe 60, maybe 75 miles at the outset, and we're going to assume that the classified information is a little bit more than that, and I'm just assuming you have told nothing. So even assuming you could go down much further than that, still the math indicates that you would not have a vessel that you should be able to detect further than about 75 miles away. So that's really interesting, and that is something I have never, ever considered before.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. If sonar is actually working essentially on a line of sight type of basis, then it would be like one sub to another. You shouldn't be able to detect much more than about 75 miles absolute max. That's assuming a 2,500 foot crush depth. So based on those numbers, yeah. And obviously, I'm sure it might even be longer than that. So like I said, I'm just throwing out numbers here based on what the math is telling me. But that's very, very interesting.
I think that the acoustic shadows, though, even once you're on the shelf, really does show that well, why are we able to find things? We find things all the time, and we're finding them with sonar, and it seems like it would be a whole lot harder if we were dealing with a curve also.
Right. Just out of curiosity, tell me the difference between active and passive sonar.
So active sonar is you're sending out a pulse. And since you're the originator of the sound, you know exactly what time you sent it, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, you now are able to reverse engineer the passive sonar, which is listening. That's just simply listening. You're able to then reverse engineer, I said, hey, 10 seconds ago, and here I just got it back. And because of that, now you can really track in and dig in on that vector, and you'll know exactly how far away something is.
In other words, you're able to hear all kinds of stuff, and for all you know, some things could be coming from, 1,000 miles away if they're in that SOFAR stream, like you
Exactly.
mentioned. Okay, but when you go active, you're sending a pulse out, you're starting a coherent oscillator, timing it just like radar, exactly how radar works, and you're timing that pulse to return to you. And based on the Doppler effect, then you are able to calculate its distance and also speed. when ping it a couple times, you can extrapolate the speed as well.
Yeah. It really does. Only in hindsight do I realize this would only work if we're living in a flat environment. In fact, all of our charts were based off that.